Welcome to the Virtual Venture Cafe, everyone, and a very special welcome to our first-time community members. Before we begin the session today, Venture Cafe Cambridge would like to pause for 1 minute to honor George Floyd and in acknowledgement of the pain so many around the country are feeling. During this moment, we ask that you reflect on the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that ended Mr. Floyd's life. Thank you for taking this time. Venture Cafe Cambridge and Venture Cafe Global Institute will be releasing a racial equity plan to make positive changes in ending systemic racism in our community. And with this, let me introduce Christopher Muller, who will be leading today's workshop. Christopher Muller is the professor of practice in the School of Hospitality at Boston University and the school's former dean. He runs several restaurants in New England and Florida, and he co-founded the European Food Service Summit, Europe's leading conference for international restaurant, supply, and food service executives. And with this, over to you, Christopher. Thank you for speaking at the Venture Cafe today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, and thanks to the Venture Cafe team for putting this all together in a time of change. Really, what a year 2020 is turning out to be. It's a year of turmoil and change, but that requires a lot of innovation. And I think that this kind of new thinking, innovation is for everyone. And I think that we'll continue this conversation moving forward. I think the next 12 to 18 months are going to be a remarkable time of change. One of the things that we're going to talk about today is there's no way I can give you the secret to financing a new startup. Or I might come from the restaurant business, but I have some experience in hotels and other things. The idea today is that it's good to keep in mind that if you have an idea that you're dreaming of, a simple dream in your head, you know more about your business idea than anyone else in the world. And you can use that to create a plan. This is about creating a business, a planning guide, making a business case for yourself and for others. Planning for your business is basically a way of opening your business to make it easier, but also to lower your risk. One of the things that I think is important here is that one of the ways to do this is to create a plan, is to use simple tools, meaning in this case equations. Equations are tools that'll help you make planning more sense to both you and to others. I'm going to suggest, I'm going to hold something up here, a couple of things. Every time I've started a new activity, this was when I became dean. This one is from when I opened a hotel in Block Island. You can see it's from 1984. And this is the one I'm using currently to start a new consulting practice with my partner, Brian Halloran. Each time I write my ideas down and use that as a basis for creating a plan. This is nothing more than just being able to put pencil to paper. So the equations and things we're going to talk about are really meant to show that. This is a great time for innovation. It's a time when we've gone through a conflagration, a change, a forest fire, but that like any major change, there's going to be green shoots that come out from it. It's the nature of life. So from adversity comes renewal, and there are going to be a lot of opportunities for what David Birch, the researcher from MIT, called income substitution. Starting a business, whether it's for a side hustle or for your main business, to say, how can I control my own destiny? People tend to want to do that, and innovation is the part of it. That's what the Venture Cafe, I think, is all about. So in this, if you have a startup or an idea for an existing enterprise that you want to expand, it's helpful to think about the fact that business managers have two real challenges. The first one is, can I identify the best way to capture an opportunity? The second one is to identify the best way to solve a problem. These are the two main reasons that entrepreneurs or innovators go into the creative space. They're either seeing an opportunity that no one else sees and rushing in, or they see a problem and they say, oh, I can fix this. The difference between these two, both of them are described as a business need, but the difference is that they are slightly different in their timing. The opportunity is something that seizes the moment. The other removes pain from a situation. Clearly, for an example, you might not want to start to rush out to create a business to make face masks for healthcare workers. It was an immediate problem. It was very present, and it was based on the panic demand for the lack of face masks. It created an immediate opportunity. It was a problem with an opportunity set. But the problem probably still remains. We're going to need face masks until the coronavirus reaches herd immunity, way past where we are now. But the opportunity set to fix that problem has changed. It might not be a good idea to rush in and try to fix that problem. That doesn't mean people can't go into the mask making business. It's just different than it was even 3 months ago. Here's an example. It's very hard to read, I know, but basically it's sometimes opportunities are present when other people create answers to problems we don't even know we had. A few years ago, no one would have thought that Mark Zuckerberg was smart for creating a thing called Facebook and being our friends on social media. And yet now it's so ubiquitous and created such a way of communicating with each other, even like we're doing now. The problem was always there. The opportunity was just identified by someone before we even realized it was a problem, something we needed that we didn't know we needed. So the essence of formal strategic planning, and that's sort of what we're getting at here, even though that's a sort of MBA kind of thing, a strategic planning, what we are trying to do is bring about a change and identifying something in the future that we can control. Michael Porter, the sort of godfather of strategic planning, says that we want to put things down and gain through writing something down, explicit, putting it down on a piece of paper or in a spreadsheet, so that we know that we have a common set of goals. Strategy, by its definition, is something that's going to take more than a year. If you have a plan to do something very quick, you want to take advantage of a fad or a current trend, like face masks, that's more tactical. So we want to keep a difference between these two perspectives. We are going to today talk about the 6-month planning, but we're also going to look at something that's going to go out more than a year. So strategy is both. But of course, planning is just a substitution for error for chaos. And what does anonymous mean by that? We can't guarantee, no one can actually predict the future. It's just impossible. What I am suggesting is that by creating choices, by making decisions today, you're actually going to lower your risks for tomorrow. And you can almost think of this as being like an insurance policy. You know, doing a ritual rain dance doesn't change the weather. Making all the plans that you have doesn't change the future, but it does give you a sense of control that you are managing the future, insuring something by managing your risk and with no cost, there's no premiums. Planning means basically designing a desired future, identifying ways to bring it about. I want this to happen. How do I get there? How do I create a path for myself? And so much of this is very simplistic and can be done by anyone, that you just need to commit to doing it and using the tools that are available to you. When you have this idea, the business need is identified, which can, will in fact require you to make some investment. The enterprise, either monetary or time, you need to understand and explain to yourself and to others what those expenses are all about. We're going to use the term return on investment, ROI, today as one of the ways of calculating the rationale for those investments. But it's good to keep in mind that this is not something that's overly complicated. Return on investment is basically calculating what you think the benefits will be, both cash and long-term, and what your costs will be. It's a very simple calculation. My old friend Bob Chase used to say that we should also consider not just the ROI, but the ROE, not the return on equity, but the return on effort. If you're bootstrapping, if you're creating something from the ground up, your costs might not be as easily identifiable and calculated because you've got to calculate your opportunity cost. If I do this, what am I going to lose? Or if I do this, will I in fact make enough back to justify the time that I've spent? So we're gonna use the numbers to create the return on investment, but I want you to keep in mind that your return on effort is something that you also need to calculate for yourself. You don't want to start an enterprise that in fact compensates you less than what you're doing now. So there's a whole bunch of ways that you can look at this. I don't know, you know your business better than I do, but here's a list of possible business case scenarios. One of the things restaurants have been facing is we do takeout and delivery. Many operators said, I don't want to get involved. Our local Irish pub, my friend Angus, said, why would I want to stand around and maybe sell 6 hamburgers a day? He said, it's not worth my effort. But if you're going into the farmer's market, if you have a new product that you want to make from home, if you're deciding on a new kind of ad campaign, or should I up my Wi-Fi? Should I build an outside patio? Do I want to turn my parking lot into a drive-in movie theater or disco? Some restaurants have done that. All of those things are business decisions that you need to calculate the cost of and the return on your investment. Is it a good decision? Will it lower my risk? Will it make the business more sound in the future? So we also need to crunch the numbers. And when you do this, you've got to sit there and say, what is it that I need to know? Don't be intimidated by the complexity of the fancy business terms. You should be able to do this by just giving these things simple names and doing nothing more than taking your notebook and putting it down with a pencil and a calculator. If you have Excel and you have a computer, many of these formulas are actually embedded in Excel, and it's an easy way for you to build that simple kind of model. What you will need, though, is a basic assumption of how much money this might cost, whether it's buying a food truck or creating a laboratory model. You need to know who's going to work for you, your operating costs. You need to know your cost of goods sold, both those that are fixed and variable, what you think you're going to do for revenues, the units that you're going to sell, whether it's a cup of coffee or a promotional pen campaign, how long you think that this is going to be involved. And this last one, the discount rate, is something that is no more complicated than the cost of borrowing money. So if you think you're going to be able to do this with loans from friends and family, the typical way somebody starts a business, they still want some kind of return because the money that they might give you is sitting in a savings account making less than 1% a year. So if you can guarantee them 2%, they're going to be happy. But in fact, most people are going to want more than that. If you had to go and borrow a home equity loan for $20,000, the bank is going to charge you an interest rate. Currently, it's probably about 4.5%. If you're going to go and get a commercial loan from a bank because you already have a business and you want to expand, that commercial loan can run you anywhere from 6.5% to 10%. I wanted to start a business a few years ago, and I had a very good friend back in 2013. I started pitching it to him, and he said, look, my venture fund is only interested in something that returns 15%. I couldn't get to 15% with my model. So as you could probably guess, I didn't I didn't open that business. He didn't loan me the money because I couldn't get to the hurdle rate. That's what the discount rate is. How much are you going to have to return to someone else or to yourself for the amount of money that you're taking out of your retirement fund or your friend's retirement funds, or just out of a savings account? So one of the first things we need to do then is to identify the kinds of business information we need. Take out your notebook, write down your assumptions, and be honest with yourself. Be truly honest, but also keep your optimism. Be optimistic in your look. So what do you need to do here? You need to talk about who my customers are going to be, who's actually going to buy what I sell. Who else is in the market that may be doing something similar? Who are my true competitors? Do my customers have alternatives? Can they do something else besides what I want to offer? Is it my niche, my segment, very small, or is it broad? Is it to a general audience, or is it somebody that just has a single need, the face mask? Build coalitions. You're going to need some investors. You're going to need some partners. You're going to need some marketing and operations and staff. Where can you find people to work for you? And then you start to do your income streams, your basic P&L statements, and we're going to look at that in just a second. But you need to go out 6 months, a year, 3 years. 5 years gets to be almost impossible. Who would have predicted 5 years ago in 2015 where we'd be today? But you also want to start to do this what's if, the what ifs. What if I do this instead of that? What if I do one thing versus another? This is a good time to ask yourself some questions and identify those things. You're going to prepare. And so the first thing is to prepare and to tell a good story. One of the ways that you can tell a good story is to ask yourself the very simple thing that we started with. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? Or what is the opportunity I see in the market? Just sit down and ask yourself that. Is it a problem or an opportunity? Is it a problem that's created an opportunity? Write it down and try to get your explanation to under 50 words. If you can get it to under 25, that's even better, because then you've got the making of your elevator pitch or anything else, but it's also concise. If you can get it to the point where it's 25 to 50 words, you're probably defining what your business is going to become in a much more concise way. The next thing is to know your audience. And so when I say know your audience, this isn't your external customers. These aren't the people that are going to buy things. These are the people that are going to help you move your business idea along. Who are you pitching it to? But it's more than just the pitch. Who's going to come along with you as you move into this new future? Part of it is, can you move ahead without an investment? Do you need somebody else to give you money? Do you need to convince a landlord to give you a space? Are you looking at an empty space in your neighborhood and saying, boy, I really would like to have my retail store there? Well, you need permits from the city or the state. Many people forget that there's a whole bunch of things, everything from the fire department, the fire marshals, to the health department, to, for a restaurant, you need a milk license, an archaic thing. But you need to know that they are the people that are going to make your business case work. So you have to start to learn about what kind of other things are we going to have. Who's my audience? Then you start to build your case. You clarify the need, the pain removal or opportunity. You create a cross-functional team. Now, this is a perfect time to start to widen your team. And part of widening your team means that you need to share your leadership. There's an old saying that don't keep your lamp under a bushel basket. Many entrepreneurs feel that if they talk about their idea, someone's going to steal it. I can guarantee you no one's going to steal your idea, because everybody else is going to think your idea is crazy. And if they are going to try to steal it, you've already got 6 months or a year ahead of them because you've started your planning in advance. Look for cross-functional teams, people that are going to have a different perspective on this. Talk to someone who may be an employee for you and see what their needs are. You might find that the assumptions you're making don't fit the marketplace. Consider alternatives, set priorities, think about about how you're actually going to do this, and use this outside voice. Then you've got to sit down and start crunching the numbers, and that's what we're going to start doing here. Is actually some number crunching. Build a solid cost estimate for yourself. Calculate your return on investment. Start a spreadsheet, Excel. You can still do this with paper and pen. For many years before we had computers, we would do all of this with a 13-column green ruled paper that you can still get at the Staples. Identify the risks. And my old friend Chris Hart called them OTSUs, the opportunities to screw up that you didn't think about until you had to think about them. While you're doing this, think about the things that may change, what the big rocks in the way that you should take advantage of planning for now. And check yourself, are you ready to see this, this to the next level? Then you're going to present your case. Again, this is part of the Venture Cafe. Venture Cafe has many people, many programs that will help you refine your pitch nights in Roxbury. This isn't really about making your pitch, but keeping in mind that a pitch is better the more planning and preparation you do. The better the preparation, the better the pitch. So all of the things we're talking about today are going to be helpful for you then. So here's the start of this. The first thing is that we're going to look at these 4 formulas, basic business formulas that are taught in business schools everywhere that sometimes people aren't really aware of. There are 4 basic things, and if you notice on this page, that they all have a slightly different set of issues. They have a different set of units of measure, and they are different timing. This first one, the break-even analysis, is probably the most crucial for a startup business. First, you'll see that it's market-driven, includes new product development. It's all about the units sold. And what it basically tells you is how much business do I need to do so I can keep the lights on. It has nothing to do about profitability or long-term viability. It's just, can I stay in business today? What do I have to do to keep the lights on? When we get further along the payback period, this is in months or years, this is going to be important to you to explain to the people who may give you money. If I do this, my window of opportunity based on all of my assumptions is that I'll pay you back in 8 months or a year or 3 years. People want to know what the payback time is. When do you reach a point of profitability that you can start making payments? The net present value is actually looking at the window of opportunity. In our case, we're going to use 5 years. Is this something that is going to be a good investment because it's going to return something back to us over time? And is my money today worth something in the future? And the internal rate of return basically is saying it's a check and balance, but it's telling us whether or not we're actually going to beat that discount rate, the hurdle that we talked about. Am I going to make 1%, 5%, 10% over the entire course of the project? So it's a little bit more complicated than the others, but let's take a look at each one of these. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with a very simple pro forma profit and loss statement. And I'm going to use a simple model here because the numbers work. I have a small 10 by 10 square foot space that I'm going to convince a friend of mine to allow me to run. I'm calling it a Starbucks mini shop. It's just a coffee shop. But I know that I have to make some assumptions. One is that I need somebody who's trained in how to make coffee. And I'm going to be there for 8 hours a day. It's not a 24-hour a day thing. I'm just going to do it 7 days a week, 8 hours a day. And I'm going to serve both guests and somewhere else. But we can make this into anything. It could be an ice cream shop, a Ben & Jerry's ice cream stand with somebody scooping ice cream and ice cream cones. 10 by 10 is not a lot of space. It's 100 square feet. Years ago, I looked at a 90 square foot space in a shopping mall to do a small sort of meat business, kebabs I was going to sell there. You can make a living doing this. What is important is that we need to create something that looks like a profit and loss statement. Some other people might call it an income statement. The pro forma piece of this, pro forma means I'm making it up. These are my best guesses. I tell my students in entrepreneurship that the important piece here is to put a rock down, put a pin in the wall. The basic thing is to come to a because statement. Why do you think that your operation, this eight line profit and loss statement is all you need to get started right now? It's got sales, cost of goods sold, how much your labor is going to be, other expenses, meaning overhead, your rent. In this case, I've got a 7% license fee in there because I'm doing this through Starbucks. That's a franchise fee, you might call it. Then there's my total cost and my annual contribution. How much does it return before taxes? In our case, I've made some assumptions. Where did I get these assumptions? I made them up. All right? I said, oh, 360 days a year. I want to take 5 days off. Christmas, New Year's, my birthday. And I think I can sell $200 worth of coffee per day for 360 days. Gives me $73,000. That's my estimated sales. I then need to look at my variable costs, labor and the cost of goods sold, my coffee, my cups, sugar, milk, and I've come up with an estimate that 15% of that number, 15% of my sales is going to give me this, and 25% of sales is going to give me this number, 18,000. Here's where that opportunity cost comes in. If you're doing this as a job, if you're creating a job for yourself, and you think you can do $200 a day selling hot dogs or chicken on a stick, or doing hair braiding, you have to say to yourself, am I able to pay someone to do this? Or is this something I'm going to do myself, and is this worth it? And you can say yes or no in both cases. The next thing that we need to look at then is this total cost. How much is if I run this business, how much do I expect I'm going to have to actually pay for things and stuff to other people? The last of these numbers is that we are going to look and see whether the net contribution is worthwhile to us. Part of the net contribution is the idea that I could add this to the labor cost if I were the only person working here. This is something you can, as I said, you can do this on a piece of paper on at your kitchen table. If you happen to have an Excel spreadsheet opportunity, many of these things can be done very quickly. There's formulas for it in Excel for almost everything we're going to talk about. So let's look at the first of those four things that we talked about, the break-even point. This is where we take the pro forma, the because statement. We start with that and we calculate this simple break-even, which means where is the point where our fixed costs are going to be covered so that we're not profitable, but we don't have to close the doors. And the break-even point is a very simple calculation. The fixed costs, what I have to pay divided by my gross profit per unit. Okay, and in my case, in our example here, that unit is a cup of coffee. Keep in mind the difference between break-even point, which is your fixed cost divided by your gross profit per unit, and profit. Profit is all of your expenses taken away from your revenues. So profit equals revenues minus expenses. All right, and you want your expenses to be low and your revenue to be high. This is not that. This doesn't show profit. This shows survival. And so let's take a look at just a quick couple of calculations. We take that mini shop that we just talked about, and we made the assumptions. In our case, the unit of sale is going to be 1 cup of coffee. And I'm going to suggest that 1 cup of coffee should be sold for $3. Is that reasonable? That's the assumption I'm making. That's my because statement. That's my rock that I put everything else on, my thumbtack in the wall. It's reasonable to me. It may not be reasonable to somebody else. So from that graphic, we said the two traditional costs that I called variable are the cost of goods, the coffee, the cups, the sugar, the milk, and the labor cost. And the labor cost was $18,000. That's 8 hours a day times an hourly wage for someone to work. I'm not going to get into it in a big deal here, but in many cases, we should say that the labor cost is fixed, not variable. In the traditional way, we look at it as variable because we say that people are assigned. We assign them to work. But even a one-person hot dog stand has to have somebody selling the hot dogs. So if the labor is a minimum amount, if it's minimum amount, it has to be there. And it's not really time sensitive or customer sensitive. technically it should be a fixed cost, but for the sake of argument, because this is how everybody's done it traditionally, labor is a variable cost. Another way to think about this, and it's just good to put in the back of your mind, is a variable cost is anything that is driven by one more customer. If one more customer comes in, does the cost change? Of course, the cost of coffee, the cup, will change. Does the price of the labor change? Not really, because the person's already there. So let's take a look at this now. Therefore, we calculate the fixed cost. The fixed cost is that variable cost that we've just calculated, and the fixed cost is then all of our costs. That was the total cost from our profit and loss minus the variable cost, food and labor, and that gives us a number of $14,370. Our gross net annual contribution at the bottom of that sheet was $29,430. So now that's our pre-tax profit, is another way of looking at it. We want to see what our pre-tax profit percentage is. So we take that number, we divide it by our total sales, and we suggest that 40% is the cost of our gross profit here. So if we are turning a margin of 40%, or our cost is 40%, our fixed cost per cup, $3 times 40.3%, means that every cup of coffee I sell costs me $1.29 before anything else. Just, in order to give somebody a cup, I have to give them $1.29. Think of it as almost like they walk in with $3 on their chest. They put a big $3 right here. They buy a cup of coffee from you, and as they leave, they're taking $1.29 with them, right? They've got the cup of coffee that they're drinking. All the rest that's left covers all your other expenses. But for us right now, the break-even point, the BEP per year, is the $14,370 divided by $1.29, means that we have to sell 11,000 cups of coffee over the year to reach break-even. You say, oh my God, 11,000 cups of coffee. That's a lot of coffee for a 100 square foot space. If we look at it by the day, we would say 11,000 cups divided by the 360 that I said we're going to be closed 5 days a year, means I basically have to sell 31 cups of coffee a day so I can keep the doors open. And the question then you ask yourself is this a reasonable thing? My test for reasonableness, for approval of the concept is it reasonable that I'll sell 31 cups of coffee per day in my little store? Yeah, that seems reasonable. For over 8 hours, I should be able to sell 31 cups of coffee. And every cup above that is going to contribute towards the sense that you're going to get to the profits that you need. Drucker said profit is the cost of staying in business. But here's the break even. Should I open or should I close? If that number were too high, I would probably say I'm never going to reach it. In this case, it seems to be reasonable. Excuse me. So we then, go back to this pro forma that we created, and there's all the numbers, and that's the basis for what we're going to need to know to do our break even. We're going to look at some of these other numbers and calculate them for another way of looking at our return on investment. The first of them is the payback period. Another form is payback, and payback basically means when do I get to start my money back from my investment? This is for your investors, whether it's your family, your partners, and yourself. When do I get my money back? How soon? How soon before it comes back? So payback is the startup investment divided by the net profit. If you look here, no, we didn't show it there, but the net investment for this, we're estimating it's going to cost me $20,000 to open this coffee shop. I have to buy some machines, I have to buy a countertop, maybe a sign, get a phone. So my investment all in is $20,000. So initial investment's 20 grand. 1 year profit is 29,430. Oh, and I look and I say, wait a minute, this is going to be fast. And yes, in fact, it is. $20,000 divided by $29,000 gives us 0.68 years, or just over 8 months. That means that if I meet my goals, if my assumptions are correct, I will start showing a profit on my business sometime and start paying back money paying back my investment after 8 months. And you would have many people say, yeah, that's a good deal. It might be unrealistic, but again, you're selling coffee, or you're selling ice cream, or you're selling sandals that you make on your own, whatever it is that you're doing. The more complicated one, but it still is easy enough for you to do by hand, is the net present value. We use the same pro forma profit and loss statement, but now what we're looking at is saying, is the value of what I'm doing going to increase the value of the money that I'm investing? The important thing here is to remind yourself that this is entirely based on the validity of your assumptions. If you have good numbers in your 5-year profit and loss statement, then this will come out. It's only as good as the value of your information and your best guess. Net present value can become intoxicating if your numbers are slightly wrong, because they build on each other. So if we look at the net annual contribution from that profit and loss statement I showed you, well, what do we have here? We have $20,000 in a startup, and over the 5 years, we showed a net return of $144,000. If you did it graphically, and this is a really good tool, every time you spend money, draw an arrow down. Draw a line across the page when you're doing your calculations. If you're spending money, make it go down. If you're getting money and revenues, make it green and show it up. So if you look here in the first year, we had 29,430. We'd seen that. Second year went up by 10%. And each year after that, our little kiosk, after our initial $20,000, showed it being profitable. Is that a reasonable thing? Well, based on the last couple of years, no one would have anticipated Corona starting in March and the destruction it's been to the economy. No one would have anticipated the last few days of social unrest. So you got to be careful with this. But had you looked at the previous 5 years, yeah, it was a pretty steady increase. Everything was looking pretty good. So we take that net present value and we say to ourselves, well, you know, there's really a cost of money. People know that $1 today is not going to be the same value as $1 in 5 years. We've had very low inflation rate. In some cases, it's been below 1%. So the dollar today has not had a different, a sort of negative value. But in most calculations, you have to assume that because of the downside of inflation, it's not going to be worth as much. That's where the last of these comes up. The last of the formulas is used as an investment to see if your business makes sense, with the expectation that you have to pay back something on it from your investment. We are going to use a 10% discounted cash flow. The 10% discounted cash flow basically means every day I hold on to something, it has less future value because I've got to pay interest on it. I've got to see a declining balance. So in this case, we take the same numbers, but because we discounted 10% every year, and if you know anything about the compound interest rate, that 144 that we saw, 144,000 that we saw before, actually comes out to 123,000. For a $20,000 investment, a return of 123,000 over 5 years is really good. There's not many other places that people are going to be able to get that kind of money. Certainly not in the stock market, and certainly not in a bank. So the calculation here, which comes right out of your Excel spreadsheet, this is just plugging in these numbers, it returned a remarkable 150,000%, 150% internal rate of return. How much did we make inside? The problem with this is that, or not the problem, but the benefit of doing this is then you sit and say, you know, that seems unlikely. It seems especially high. Is it reasonable for me to have made that much money, knowing that my break-even point is only 31 cups of coffee a day? Maybe you want to go back and revisit your assumptions and say, should my labor cost be higher, or should my rent be higher? You know, or should I assume that I'm not going to be expanding by 10% every year for the next 5 years? Would a 3% growth rate be better? Or should I expect that my cost of coffee might go up because of a drought or climate change? All of those things help you to become slightly better at what you're doing. So this last one is sort of like a check and balance. It's a way of saying, is my plan reasonable? In this case, because we're selling coffee or ice cream where the margins might be especially high, then maybe we're in okay shape. But it should be something that, as the last step, it gives you a chance to check your ideas. And so the idea here is to keep in mind that your assumptions are only good as your assumptions. And here, we don't need your intuition mumbo jumbo. What we do want to do is take numbers out of the air, which is the pro forma. We call them assumptions, which is what I just did. Add the net present value and make sure we get the discount rate right. Well, as Dogbert here is facing, these are all numbers that we made up ourselves. So the more honest you are with yourself when you do these things, the better off your plan will be. As the military says, all the planning in the world is great until the battle begins. You know, even Tom Brady threw interceptions once in a while. So that's a really short 40 or 35-minute synopsis of how to do some business planning. My suggestion to you is plan to do the break-even point, and if nothing else. So you need your profit and loss statement, your assumptions. You need to ask yourself some questions and do the break-even point to see whether or not you're going to do enough business to actually make this sustainable and keep the doors open. So thanks to the Venture Cafe Foundation. If there's questions or things, I'll answer them. Let me know what's on your mind.
Thank you. Questions are welcome at any point, so please feel free to type them in chat, and I'll read them aloud. I know there's one question, and Amin is asking whether you're open to sharing your presentation.
Oh yes, I'm a professor, and so what I will do is I'll put this in a PDF, and because there are things that I'm sure people want to have, I will make it available to Venture Cafe, and they'll post it with as a side piece to the presentation.
Sure. So what I can also do is I can put my email in the chat box for you all. Feel free to reach out to me by email, and I'll be able to forward the presentation over to you. Mm-hmm. There's another question. Okay, will you share an Excel sheet for these ROIs, and what resources or book should I read further?
Okay, that is not done on a spreadsheet. That one was, but it's just, if you looked, it was actually something I clipped out of an article I wrote on building a business case. It's better for you to make your own. There's no models that are, this is really simple, plus and minus. That's why I said you can literally do it on a piece of paper. So no, I don't have any Excel spreadsheets for this. Better for you to learn how to do it and just plug it in. Take you maybe an hour to figure out how to do an 8-line spreadsheet. Oh, and the books. There's a lot of books that are available on this, and I think my idea is to contact the Venture Cafe folks in Cambridge or in District Hall in Roxbury, and take advantage of the many programs that are offered there. There's lots of things on how to do this. But if you go a basic accounting, or even better, a management accounting textbook, will give you all of these formulas. Very simple. You can go to the library and get, this is not rocket science.
Any other questions?
Good luck starting your own businesses, or your ideas. Doesn't have to be a business, just innovation. Innovation is for everyone. Go out and do stuff. It's going to be a really interesting time in the next couple of, next year and a half or so.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Thank you so much for giving this presentation. Thank you everyone for joining. It was great having you. I'll be available in the virtual networking room if you would like to chat more. And the virtual networking room is hoping to be open in 14 minutes. If you would like to access it, just go back to vancaf.org/sign-in. This is the page from where you came to this session. yeah, and I see you there. Thank you so much.